studies.
Welcome to the European Institute for Asian Studies on this surprisingly sunny afternoon in Brussels. Recent years we've seen an increase in interest in EU-China relations, whether it's political, economic, or cultural. And today we will be focusing on a rather specific area of the bilateral ties, or the EU-China ties, which is agricultural trade, which is believed, due to the recent change in sanitary standards set by the European Commission, to have a significant impact on agricultural trade between the EU and China. And to further elaborate on this, I would like to introduce Ms. Lele, who is a visiting fellow here at our institute. And she's a student in applied economics and management at Cornell University in the United States, and where she mainly focuses on agricultural policy, international trade, and quantitative analysis. Yeah, and Lei, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thanks for all of you to come today to my seminar. And then, so before I start, I would like to explain a little bit, make it a little bit clarification, because since I came here, I noticed that here as the center of the European Union, as the capital of the Europe, people here more pay attention to the overall general political economics issues. But then as a PhD student at school, I mean my research actually is very specific. Very specific applied economics topic. So today here I try to integrate my own specific research into the general picture here. So I will do first to introduce a little bit background of the Sino-European agriculture trade, and then use my specific research as a very detailed case study. And then after that, hopefully, the policy recommendation made accordingly could shed some light on the overall pictures of the Sino-European agriculture trade. So because I know that most audience, that audience will have very diversified background. So I'm not sure whether what I'm going to present will meet your expectation or not. But I hope at least something will benefit to you, and then you can bring something home. So first of all, let's see. So I'm going to talk about the European agriculture policy impact on Sino-EU trade, and as I have said, it will be a very specific case study on apple and subjected to the SPS, the sanitary and phytosanitary barriers. So the presentation outline will follow as following. And then first of all, I'm going to talk about the motivation for this research topic. So we all know that Europe and China are two major leading economies in the world, and there are all kinds of diversified bilateral activities going on between the two economies. And then they two together actually composed the second largest economic cooperation bodies in the world. And actually every day there are about $9 billion trade between the two bodies. And then here are the two charts showing you that the Europe is the largest import partners of China, and the second largest export partners of China, and overall the first trade partner of China. And on the other hand, EU is also overall the second largest trade partners of China. So there are a lot of things going on, especially in terms of the international trade, among the bilateral activities. And then since this case study I made is on a specific regulation, SPS regulation, the EC came out, which create barriers for Chinese exports, agricultural exports into the European market. So in the whole presentation research, I'm going to pay more attention on the EU imports from import side, instead of the exporting side. So those tables are from the European Commission, and then the first one shows like basically the overall European imports from China, and then we can see that the second under the primary products, the code 1100 is the agricultural one. It's during those year period from 2008 to 2012, it has been kept on an increasing rate, although not very fast increasing, but it has been increasing. And then on the second table shows you that the agriculture imports composed like about 5% of Europe overall imports from China. Although very small, but it's already like the fifth, ranks the fifth commodity between of European imports from China. And then although the number is small, but it also implies there is big potential. There is still a lot of space to improve. And then so those two figures again shows you like the Europe import from China, and during the recent years it has been kept in an increasing rate. And the right line here, the blue line here on the right hand side of on the right figure is the agriculture trend. You can see it basically follows the overall import trend and it's keeping increasing. And then that figure on the corner shows only the agriculture imports. It's basically has been on an increasing rate. And then from the two governments, there are all kinds of international cooperation and strategy coordination in terms of improve the agriculture trade value and also in terms of rural development. So this is overall about how international agriculture trade between the two parties. And then in terms of, as long as you talk about agriculture trade, there's one issue you cannot avoid, which is the SPS barriers. The SPS is the sanitary and phytosanitary barriers. So like there are a lot of literature study about this issue and a lot of SPS issues going on whenever there's trade about agriculture. And actually a lot of research has shown that the SPS impact, the SPS non-tariff impact on trade value has similar level of impact as the tariff value. So it's actually a very important factor in terms of agriculture trade. And then in terms specifically to the China and Europe SPS issue, China has been suffered a lot from the SPS issue when trading with Europe. Basically, China has its annual estimation that China lost about 99 million US dollar every year just because of the SPS standard. And among it, 41% of those SPS problems lost to the European Union. And then meanwhile, the European Union also suffers from the Chinese SPS barriers, especially from the private sector. There has been a lot of complaints from the private sector going on. They complain about the untransparency and inefficiency about the Chinese government SPS standard making, and also there's inconsistency between the province and the central government in terms of implementing those SPS issues. So in terms of, actually there's a research made by the European Commission specifically on the SPS and the non-tariff and tariff barrier. And then according to the research, if there can be a moderate liberalization of the tariff and non-tariff barrier, there can be like a certain amount of trade increasing between the two parties. And then, so those are like basically the motivation why this topic is important and why we look at it. And then specifically to the case study, I'm going to talk about some background information. So those two figures shows the Europe apple import from its major trading countries. For both the one on the right hand side. On the right hand side is the North Hemisphere countries, and the other one is the South Hemisphere countries. And China here is the green color one here on the top. So basically, the trend of EU apple import has been dropping down due to financial crisis and some other like factors. But overall, like China fits into the dropping trend. But luckily, we can observe, especially from 2009 to 2011, the dropping from China's apple imports are like relatively smaller. Or the rate is relatively smaller compared to other countries. So this is the overall trend of Europe apple imports. And then in terms of Apple specifically, there is some background introduction of one chemical. It's called the D-fluorine. I mean, it's for abbreviation is DPA, which is much easier to pronounce it. So I would just go with DPA the entire process. So it's a chemical applied to apples in order to prevent it suffering from post-harvest disorders. It's a like worldwide applied one. Basically, all apple growers and actually pear growers all use this. And then, however, recent years there is a health concern raised against this like post-harvest chemical. Although there are no actual data to testify whether it is causing healthy problem to human beings, but it's some issue already initiated to the European government. So like starting from 2009, there is the debate going on in European Commission about how to deal with this problem. And during this years now, finally, some specific regulation has been made in this early August. And then current available alternative for this chemical DPA is one called 1-MCP, is the so-called Smart Fresh, and the other one is the controlled atmosphere. Those are the only two available alternatives for DPA, but then both of them has its comparative advantage and also disadvantage, which I'm going to talk about later. Yeah, this is a picture showing you what are the usually like apple post-harvest disorders, some flash browning, also superficial scar, which DTA and 1-MCP are especially good at treating it. And then, so this is the new European Commission regulation on DTA. So basically, it has dropped the maximum residual level, the so-called MRL of DTA from 5 mg per kilogram to 0.1 mg per kilogram on apple. And that table shows you up to 2010, what are the DPA MRL standard for most countries. You can tell even the Codex, which is the international standard, is set at 5, and EU used to be 5.2, and China also 5. But then, like this drop from 5 to 0.1 is very dramatic. It's basically difficult to meet for most apple producers. So we can basically say it's like a banning of DPA. And there are research going on based on a survey to all the major apple producers in different countries. Basically, it seems at least in the short run, before any effective alternatives came out, there will be a very drastic reduce of the volume of apples imported into the UK and the European Union. And then this regulation is going to be effective early next year. It just came out August 8th. And then, so how after this regulation, how are the world apple market react? From internationally, Brazil, Chile, and South Africa, which are the major apple producers, they are still research on other alternatives like the 1-MCP. And domestically, in the European Union, like big apple producers, Germany, Italy, Portugal, and Spain also do the same thing. And then for the USA, the other, like the biggest trading partner of European Union, what USA did is the USDA funded some project on inventing new biomarker technology, which is a good substitution, hopefully, as the chemical to prevent post-harvest disorder. And the US actually is cooperate with New Zealand. And also there are huge complaints from the New York State farmer, basically the East Coast apple growers, which are the main apple exporter to the European market. They have already discussion going on about maybe thinking about abandoning the Europe market in order to avoid this EPA regulation ban. And then as for China, it's still, there has been research going on for the 1-MCP. And for another thing, make China different from other countries because it's a developing economy. It may create even more challenge situation for China to adopt any other new technology compared to the other like more developed countries. And then so in order to capture how the Chinese market reacts to this new regulation of EPA ban, I'm going to adopt an economic model which using the ex-ante method, which is require the actual apple data, price and quantity apple data, and also some parameters of the economic variables based on industry and academia estimation. And then, so this basically is a simulation model which should be able to capture all the exogenous shocks to the market and then capture how the market reacts. So this is what I made to represent the Chinese market. The big circle inside, there are two things that the input for apples. Basically, the farm input is the fertilizer, seed, everything, I mean irrigation, and also the post-harvest storage chemicals. It contains everything that the apple involves in the producing of apples. And then the marketing input is the harvest. And then so all those like inputs goes into apples. And obviously there are different types of apples. And then in order to facilitate this specific research on post-harvest storage, so I grouped the apple varieties into which are more susceptible to post-harvest disorder, less susceptible to this post-harvest disorder, and non-susceptible. And also based on the characteristic of apples imported to the European market, like exported to the European market, I have categorized them according to different grades. The extra fancy one, and cows. The cows here is a terminology in apple industry. It's basically those very small and like not very well grown apples. It's just usually go directly to process. It will make into juice and jams. So for European market, they mainly import the extra fancy apples. So and then like so this is the apple domestic market, and then the other arrow there shows that Chinese apple market exports to the international market. That's world export. And then, so this is the summary of what kind of apples European market imports from China. they usually basically 3/4 of the imports apple from China are fresh one, and then the European consumers prefer smaller sized apple and sour more the sweet. I don't know. I mean, you guys said European consumers. I'm not sure whether it's true, but it's based on literature. And then, so the varieties usually exported to European market are golden delicious, those things, and some of it like honey crisp and gala and red delicious are those suffered more from post-harvest storage, like the highly susceptible. But then for Fuji, are less suffered. So there will be different impact on those different varieties of apples. And then so basically there now for Chinese market there are exogenous shocks because of the regulation ban. So on the exporting side, because of the EU policy ban on DPA, then there will be like decreased demand of certain kinds of apples which not meet the DPA standard. So there will be one shock over there. And that's the first stage in the shock run. And then later on the second stage, when the farmers realize, okay, I cannot export apple with DPA anymore, then I'm going to naturally switch to other alternatives. So that is the second, like basically exogenous shock, which will costing more like input cost from in terms of farm input. And then so this will be how the market, like the Chinese market structure and how it will be affected by the DPA ban. And then based on the economic results, let's first look at the result analysis. So the first scenario I create is the first stage when there is decrease of demand due to the DPA ban. And we can tell for the highly susceptible extra fancy variety, which is the one mainly export to the European market, there are both demand shrink in the domestic and international market. And and of course the price goes down. And then like for welfare, there are the numbers are all in percentage. So the welfare, we can see huge welfare loss for both producer and consumer, and the consumer supplies dropped by 88%. So this is scenario one. And then scenario two, in the second stage, when apple growers naturally switch to other alternatives, this time we can see that for the three varieties, which are like three grades, which are highly susceptible to the post-harvest storage, they are not very much affected in terms of volume. But then like for consumer supplies, it's not hugely affected, but the producer supplies drop a lot, which is making sense because you need to switch to more expensive input alternative. And then scenario three is basically a combination of the first two scenarios. And we can tell from the results, basically the fresh apple market, which is the highly susceptible extra fancy and fancy apples, are basically shrink, because China mostly exporting fresh apple to Europe market, and then the only survival ones are the cows, which are used for processing apple industry. And then there are overall welfare loss from both producer and consumer side. So to summarize all the like change overall, for China, the producer welfare loss in both short run and long run, and then consumer welfare loss in the short run, but maybe better off in the long run due to some, the health cancer problem and all those kind of things. And then for the impact, it will differ. European domestic producers will naturally enjoy of less competition. But then in the long run, there may be loss again because they also face the same problem of meeting the 0.1 standard, which is difficult to make, and also different impact for different member states who are like major apple producers who are not like those. And also in the long run, because there's the famous Apple war between the Japan and US. So this thing, I mean, because this impact is not only on China, it's basically exposed to all Apple exporting countries. So if there are any country report this to WTO, then there will be EU has to face the WTO disputes. And of course, between the two, there will be less trade activities going on because of this policy ban. So some policy suggestions based on the result. So for China, of course, first of all, develop more efficient DPA alternative. By efficient, I mean both like economically and also whether it is feasible to implement. And in terms of the SPS issue, so the Chinese government is supposed to strengthen its communication and cooperation with international certificate organizations and also like enhance its managerial and technical capacities in order to be more compelled and to more update. And of course, in terms of enforcement of the SPS standard to the international level. And another thing is maybe the Chinese Apple market can seek to explore other markets to make market diversify. Maybe try to export apples to Middle East or like Africa countries. And then in terms for EU, so first of all, in terms of this new 0.1 MRL implementation, if the EU Commission could think about to slow it down a little bit, to gradually drop from 5 to 3 to 2, and then gradually to 0.1, because now the standard is too small. It's basically difficult even for the domestic Apple producers to meet. And also learn from the Japan-US case. The EU probably will confront the WTO case, and of course, as for the domestic consumers' welfare, like for Japan, because of both their economy for Apple, all kinds of Apple, their Apple consumption is one of the lowest in all the developed economies. Apple in Japan it's kind of luxury. They treat it as a dessert which you share with people instead of here you just eat it as a snack. But I mean, I'm not Japanese, so I don't know. It's all based on literature. I'm not sure whether it's true or not. And then also the technology development, the EU also itself, you need to develop alternatives for the DPA. And then for the two parties together, it's still the same thing, strengthen international cooperation, communication, and based on government support. And then for further research, because I know there are limitations in my research, first of all, if I want to capture more about the European side in fact, the model can be improved into like only capture the trade flow between China and EU instead of modeling it to the whole world. And then also the European domestic information, I'm still kind of lack here. I think more data and information from the European domestic side will be definitely more beneficial for later research. And then, so thank you.
Hi everyone, if you really liked this video, then make sure you subscribe here and make sure you never miss out on one